Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the story of Galway, that captivating city on Ireland's west coast. Looking at the material we've gathered, it's obviously a place just layered with history, but also buzzing with this unique modern energy. Our mission here for you is to pull out the most interesting, the most telling details, basically giving you a shortcut to really understanding what makes Galway, Galway.
Exactly, and our sources, they really do give us this rich picture of Galway. We're talking its ancient roots, its key role through the centuries, right up to its geography, its climate, which is pretty distinct, and of course its amazing culture and literary scene. We're here to unpack all that for you.
Absolutely. Just seeing Galway mentioned so often, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? What's the real story there? Okay, let's start digging in. Where's the best place to begin with Galway?
Well, the logical starting point has to be the name itself, I think. Galway.
Yeah.
It comes from the Irish word Gariam, originally the name of the river on the edge of the first settlement. The pronunciation is something like Sawa.
Gailey Mashag.
Okay.
Yeah, and historically you might sometimes see it written Galiv or Galiv. Those were early attempts to anglicize the Irish sound.
Got it. Gaelin Shalav. And I also see this nickname, City of the Tribes. That sounds, it sounds like there's a story there.
Oh, there definitely is. That nickname, Cathair Nadi Tre, in Irish, it refers to 14 really prominent merchant families. These families basically ran the show during the city's Hiberno-Norman period. That's, after the Normans arrived, when the two cultures were mixing. They were known as the Tribes of Galway, though not really tribes in the old Gaelic sense, more like powerful dynasties.
Right, powerful merchant families basically shaping the city in the Middle Ages. That's fascinating. So how did the settlement itself actually start?
It begins with a fort, Dún Gaelum, which means Fort Gaelum. This was set up way back in 1124. The king of Connacht, Teirdalbach Lua Conchobar, built it mainly as a naval base.
A naval base back in 1124.
Yeah, for his fleet. And then, as usually happens, the settlement just sort of grew up around this fort. So that early naval base really flags its strategic importance from the get-go. And then you mentioned the Normans came in.
Precisely. During the Norman invasion of Connacht, this would be the 1230s, Richard Mór de Burgh took the fort, Dún Galimhe. Then, over the next few centuries, as the de Burghs became, let's say, more integrated, more Gaelicized, and maybe less tightly controlled by England, those merchant families, the tribes, they started pushing for more control over the actual walled city.
And it sounds like they got what they wanted.
They did, yeah. Bit by bit, they gained more influence. And then a key moment was 1484. That's when the English crown officially granted Galway mayoral status, a big step towards autonomy for the tribes.
Okay, but you mentioned complexities.
Yeah.
Especially with the native Irish nearby.
Right. It wasn't always smooth sailing. The relationship between the ruling families inside the walls and the Gaelic Irish communities outside could be quite tense.
I guess this next point really highlights that. Tell me about this inscription on the West Gate. That sounds pretty blunt.
Ah, yes. It's a stark example of the attitudes back then. It was finished in 1562 by the mayor, Thomas Ode Martin, and it read, "From the ferocious O'Flahertys may God protect us."
Wow.
And on top of that, there was apparently a bylaw basically saying native Irish weren't allowed into the walled town without permission. There was even a saying, something like, "Neither O nor Mac shall strut nor swagger through the streets of Galway."
That really paints a picture of, strict boundaries in a sense of us versus them. But despite all that, how was Galway doing on the bigger stage?
Yeah.
In terms of trade and things?
Actually, it was thriving. Became a really major trading port in the Middle Ages. Its location was perfect for trade, especially with Spain and France.
Spain and France. Makes sense, right on the Atlantic. Are there any, physical reminders of that trading heyday?
Definitely. The Spanish Arch is probably the most famous one. Chin an Bala in Irish, meaning the end of the wall. It's still there, a very visible symbol of that time. It was built when William Martin was mayor, early 1500s, around 1519-20.
The Spanish Arch, yeah. Everyone knows that image. Now, this next bit is really intriguing. Christopher Columbus might have visited Galway.
It's a fascinating historical possibility. There's a note suggesting he was in Galway in 1477, maybe just a stopover. But even more curious is something he apparently wrote later in his copy of a book called Imago Mundi. He mentioned men of Cathay landing in Galway. Now, Cathay usually meant China, but it's thought these were probably Inuit people.
Inuit, how?
Swept across the Atlantic by ocean currents, most likely. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how connected the world was, even then, in unexpected ways.
Inuit landing in Galway, centuries ago. That's kind of mind-blowing. Puts a whole different perspective on things. Yeah. Okay, so moving forward in time a bit. The 17th century sounds like it was pretty turbulent for Galway's loyalties.
It really was. They started out loyal to the English crown, but by 1642, they'd sided with the Catholic Confederation during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. That led to a brutal 9-month siege by Cromwell's forces, who eventually took the city. And then later, towards the end of the century in the Williamite War, Galway backed the Jacobites. And, well, they were captured again. These conflicts were just devastating for the city, and particularly for those leading merchant families.
Sounds like those constant shifts and sieges really battered the city. And then, of course, you have the Great Famine later on.
Yes, the 19th century brought more hardship with the Great Famine, 1845 to 1852. It just compounded the problems for many of those old Galway families who had already lost so much. A truly terrible period for all of Ireland, and Galway felt it deeply.
Such a history. Prosperity mixed with real struggle. Let's shift focus a bit now to the physical place. Where exactly is Galway located?
It's got a really prime spot right on the River Corrib. It's a short river connecting the huge Lough Corrib Lake to the sea at Galway Bay. And it's the biggest city, population-wise, in the whole province of Connacht.
And the climate there, right on the Atlantic coast, I bet it's bracing.
You'd think so, but it's actually surprisingly mild for its latitude. It's classified as an oceanic climate. CFB is the code. Thanks to the North Atlantic current, the Gulf Stream it stays temperate. Generally moist, changeable, typical Irish weather, some might say.
So not massive heat waves or deep freezes usually?
Not typically, no. Extremes are rare. Average in January is around 5.9 degrees Celsius, maybe 15.9 in July. They do get quite a bit of rain, though, over 1,100 millimeters a year, spread out fairly evenly.
And what about those famous Atlantic storms? You hear about the wind on the West Coast.
Oh, yeah, they definitely get those. Severe windstorms are pretty common, especially late autumn through early spring. Those big Atlantic low-pressure systems rolling in.
Right.
But on the upside, because it's quite far north, you get those lovely long summer days. Sunrise just after 5 a.m. around the solstice. Sunset near 10 p.m.
Nice.
Winter days are short, of course. Sun not up till nearly 9 a.m. and sits just after 4 p.m. around the winter solstice. That's all Western European time.
Long summer evenings sound pretty good. Okay, let's talk landmarks. Galway seems packed with historic buildings.
It really is. You've got Lynch's Castle right on Shop Street. It's a medieval townhouse from the 16th century, amazingly preserved. It's a bank now.
Up in a medieval castle. Cool.
Then there's St. Nicholas's Collegiate Church. Huge significance there. It's the largest medieval church in Ireland that's been used continuously since it was founded, back in 1320.
Wow, almost 700 years of continuous use. Incredible. What about some newer, relatively speaking, buildings?
Well, Galway Cathedral is much newer, consecrated in 1965. It's got a very different look, kind of an eclectic mix, drawing on Renaissance and Romanesque styles.
Yeah.
Stands out on the skyline.
Yeah.
And then there's the University of Galway. The original quadrangle building dates back to 1849, right in the middle of the famine.
Founded during the famine. That says something.
It really does, a commitment to education even then. And now, the university even holds UNESCO archives for Celtic languages.
Impressive. And I saw a note about a really old hotel.
That's the Hardiman, right on Eyre Square. It started life as the Railway Hotel back in 1845. Changed names a few times. Great Southern, Hotel Merrick. But yeah, it's the city's oldest hotel still operating. Must have some stories.
I bet. What about Menlo Castle? Sounds a bit romantic, maybe ruined.
It is ruins now, yeah. Just outside the city. It was the home of the Blake family, another one of those tribes. And interestingly, the front wall, the facade of their city townhouse, Blake's Castle, that's still standing in the city itself. A link between their country estate and their city presence.
A reminder of those powerful families, and there's a canal, too.
Yep, the Eglinton Canal. It links the River Corrib down to the sea near the Claddagh area. It's not very long, just over a kilometer.
Ah, the Claddagh. Everyone knows the name, mostly from the ring, right? Is that the oldest bit of Galway?
It is generally considered the oldest part, yeah. Though, sadly, not much of the original thatched fishing village is left. But the local church, St. Mary's on the Hill, has an old medieval statue, Our Lady of Galway. And they still do the blessing of the day every year, keeping that connection to the sea alive.
Nice that some traditions carry on. What's the brown doorway?
That's another piece saved from the past. It was the fancy entrance to the townhouse of the Brown family, another tribe. Now it just stands on its own, preserved up at the north end of Eyre Square, like a piece of history displayed as art.
Huh. Okay. And then there's this story about the Lynch window. Sounds quite dramatic.
It's a pretty grim legend, yeah. There's a plaque on Market Street marking the spot. The story goes that in 1493, the mayor, James Lynch Fitzstephen, well, the legend says he hanged his own son.
Hanged his own son. Why?
For murdering a young Spanish visitor, apparently because the visitor was getting attention from the son's girlfriend. The mayor carried out the sentence himself, supposedly from the window of his house.
Good grief. That's intense. Really brings home how different things were.
Definitely a chilling story. It sticks with you.
Yeah. What about a Hall of the Red Earl? It sounds ancient.
It is. It's the earliest bit of the medieval settlement still standing inside the old city walls. Built by the de Burgos back in the 13th century. It was like the town hall. They collected taxes there, held court, had feasts. A real center of medieval life.
Right. A proper hub.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, Galway today is just so known for its culture, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's often called Ireland's cultural heart, Croí Cultúrtha na HÉireann, and it really lives up to it. Festivals all year round, like the Tulka Festival of Visual Arts in November, and a huge one. It was named a UNESCO City of Film in 2014.
UNESCO City of Film, that's a pretty big deal. Suggests a lot going on creatively.
For sure. Even back in 2004, there were stats showing loads of cultural groups: dance, film, music, theater, you name it, plus plenty of venues. The main public squares are Eyre Square, officially John F. Kennedy Park and Spanish Parade, down by the Spanish Arch. Lots of places for things to happen.
And it seems Galway's picked up some interesting titles over the years.
Huh. Yes. Apparently, it was named one of the world's sexiest cities in a survey back in 2007.
Sexy. Okay.
And it consistently ranks really high as a tourist destination in various polls, sometimes even beating major European capitals. Quite the journey from medieval fort to sexiest city.
It certainly is. Okay, finally, let's touch on literature. Galway seems to have inspired a lot of writers.
Oh, definitely. A really strong literary tradition, and it's still very much alive. There's a whole community of contemporary poets working in Galway, people like Fred Johnston, Rita Ann Higgins, Elaine Feeney. The list goes on. And then there are the famous writers connected to Galway. Walter Mackin, Liam O'Flaherty, Ken Bruin's crime novels are set there. Even Frank Harris, quite the character. He was born in Galway.
And the University Library sounds like a treasure trove for this stuff.
Absolutely. The James Hardiman Library at the University of Galway has amazing archives. Papers of writers like Thomas Kilroy, John McGahern, plus historical records like Galway City Council minutes going way back. And the city has literary magazines, the Galway Review, Cronog, and that famous independent bookshop, Charlie Burns, a real hub for book lovers, I imagine.
Sounds like it. And Galway itself actually appears in some major literary works.
It does. James Joyce's famous story, The Dead, Greta Conroy's memories of Michael Fury are set in Galway. And an early Joyce poem, She Weeps Over Rahoon, connects to his wife Nora Barnacle's Galway roots and an old flame of hers.
Right, I remember that from The Dead.
Then you've got Walter Mackin's novel, Rain on the Wind, set right there. And Ken Bruin's Jack Taylor novels give you a grittier, modern Galway. So yeah, from old legends to modern crime thrillers, Galway keeps weaving itself into stories.
This has been really fascinating going through all this. Looking back now, what are the main things that, for you, really define Galway's story?
I think what keeps coming up is this idea of Galway as a meeting place, a kind of crossroads. You have the Gaelic world, then the Normans, then these incredibly powerful merchant families, the tribes, forging this unique identity.
Yeah, that really stands out.
Then its role as a major trading link to Europe, especially Spain. And its resilience, too, bouncing back from those conflicts, the famine, all happening in that dramatic setting by the Atlantic. It's quite a mix.
It really is. For me, I think that Columbus anecdote and the idea of Inuit landing there, it just grabs the imagination, you know, those unexpected global connections centuries ago. And the whole City of the Tribes narrative, that sense of a distinct, powerful urban identity being carved out. It's compelling stuff.
It absolutely is. And you see how that history of mixing cultures, of adapting to influences from inside Ireland and from overseas, has created this really dynamic, vibrant spirit. A spirit you still feel today, especially in its art scene, its festivals, its UNESCO City of Film status. It's an energy that keeps reinventing itself.
That's a great way to put it. So thinking about that long history as a cultural meeting point, and now its role as a city of film, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Here's a thought for you, our listener. In this super connected world we live in now, how do you think Galway's unique creative identity might keep evolving? How would it shape its future? Something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Galway.